This is One Sentence News, a daily podcast featuring 3 news stories with a sentence-long summary and 1 sentence of context apiece. I'm Colin Wright. It's Tuesday, March 8th, 2022. Let's talk about the news. From the Washington Post, Russia sticks to demand for Crimea and other territory as casualties climb. In today's Russia-Ukraine war summary, while a third round of peace talks between Ukraine and Russia did result in some new logistical arrangements for a refugee corridor between the two sides, nothing else was agreed upon, as Russia reportedly continues to demand that Ukraine give up Crimea and a large chunk of the eastern part of its territory, alongside other concessions, in exchange for peace. The UK government is considering an instant asset freeze on local Russian oligarch wealth, which would prevent oligarchs from liquidating their local wealth before other sanctions are fully implemented. A nearly complete nuclear deal with Iran may be held up by Russian demands that sanctions leveled against them because of their invasion not apply to their trade with Iran. And analysts are saying that Russian forces will attack Odessa, a Ukrainian port city of about 1 million people, soon. Economic consequences of both the invasion itself and the sanctions that were leveled in retaliation are beginning to ripple outward, in large part because of travel and shipping restrictions, and a sudden shortage of a few fundamental commodities like oil and gas, a lot of which come from Russia, and wheat, a lot of which come from both Russia and Ukraine. This is expected to continue being the case for the foreseeable future and could have a global compounding effect, much like the pandemic-related supply chain issues we've seen over the past few years. From Forbes, first entirely AI-developed drug enters Phase 1 trials. A Hong Kong biotechnology company called In Silico Medicine has announced that a novel drug target and novel molecule it discovered using artificial intelligence will soon enter Phase 1 trials. In practice, this means software was used to discover a vulnerability for a condition, in this case idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, but also to figure out a means of leveraging that vulnerability in medicinal form. AI has been used for portions of this process in the past, but an end-to-end AI approach could make the often quite long and expensive journey of discovering and developing medications and medicinal treatments a lot more rapid, efficient, and inexpensive if this attempt or another future attempt pays off. And from Bloomberg, COVID reality arrives for Kiwis as Fortress New Zealand falls. After about 2 years of successfully staving off the pandemic conditions most of the rest of the world has been burdened with all this time, New Zealand is seeing spiking infection numbers and an economic shock similar to what other nations faced back in 2020. Conditions in New Zealand are still spectacular compared to other nations' report cards on this matter. A mere 65 official deaths, and again, 2 years of relative safety, calm, and freedom of movement and behavior, and thus, too, relative economic stability. But now that the so-called Fortress New Zealand approach to locking down completely to keep COVID out has lapsed, schools are closing, high streets are vacant, and it's estimated that more than 4% of the total population is currently infected. If you're finding some value in One Sentence News, consider leaving a quick review wherever you get your podcasts and/or sharing the show with a friend. You can find out more about this show or subscribe to the email version at onesentencenews.com. And you can support this and other related projects, like the Let's Know Things and Brain Lenses podcasts, at understandery.com.